Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. Let's begin by taking a deep breath. When was the last time you cried in front of someone? I invite us all, if we are brave and able, to recall a moment when we cried in someone else's presence. Did you find the memory? It may take some of us only seconds, and for some of us, it's been so long that we truly don't remember. If this exercise has you squirming a little, I apologize. And also, I don't apologize. And I hope that if you are able, that you stay with me a little longer. I'll go first. I'll share that a few weeks ago, my Bible professor played a song that touched me so deeply that I felt tears of joy swelling up. I saw that button on the Zoom platform that lets you turn off your video. So privacy was literally at my fingertips. But I chose to stay on camera, thinking, why should I be ashamed to cry? What message would I be sending to all of those who cry tears in my presence if I were afraid to show my own happy tears to my classmates? The screens that connect us so beautifully during this time also shield us from each other so that we don't have to see each other crying. Crying, an expression of a raw and true kind of emotion that we so often hide from one another. We are taught to hide our tears. We are taught to wipe them away quickly, not to let them burn as they slide down our cheeks. So, our truest fears might be the ones that we cry alone, unwitnessed. We all do cry in our own way. We all do. We enter into this world with the cries of our first breath of life, unashamed and wailing. And as we grow, our crying changes. Some of us spend our lives building armor in order to walk our paths in this world without crying. And some of us need that armor, and we love you and we want you to survive. And so if your armor is that kind, keep it on and bless that armor for protecting you. But if you can loosen it a little, I invite us to talk tonight about crying. Joseph cries openly in this week's Parashat Vayigash. He has been living in Egypt far away from his family for years, and they've now journeyed to Egypt to buy food during the famine. Joseph is now a powerful vizier in Pharaoh's court, and when he first sees his brothers, shall we say, he puts them through hell, keeping one hostage and then enslaving another. He has a lot of understandable resentment against these brothers who sold him into slavery so many years ago. As the brothers arrive in Pharaoh's court, not yet recognizing Joseph, we read that Joseph can no longer control himself. Velo yachol Yosef lihit apek. Rashbam, a medieval commentator, grandson of Rashi, notices this phrasing that Joseph could no longer control himself. And he teaches that in that phrasing is an implication that he had been controlling himself. He had been stopping himself from crying. Rashbam points back to 2 chapters earlier when Joseph first met his brothers. In a poignant moment, Joseph asks about his father's health, and he recognizes his younger brother, Benjamin, who's now all grown up. And we read that then Joseph hurried out of the room, overcome with feeling toward his brother, and was on the verge of tears. And he went into his room and he wept there. Now, this time, instead of running out of the room, Joseph orders his attendants out of the room, leaving just his brothers. And he finally cries in front of them. And crucially, it is in this moment of his tears that Joseph is finally able to tell the truth about his identity. Using the reflexive form of the verb, Behitzvada Yosef el Echav, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, soon even gathering the courage to say, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Joseph could not be his true self without first letting himself feel his emotions, and then eventually by allowing his loved ones to see his tears too. Tears and truth are prerequisites for Joseph's reconciliation with his brothers. Just like we practice gratitude in our community, we practice to strengthen those muscles each week on Shabbat. I challenge us to strengthen the muscle of feeling our emotions and sharing truth with each other. Because in truth-telling, we see each other's humanity more clearly. And in truth-telling, others can see our humanity more clearly, and we are less alone. Creating connection by sharing our true experiences was a defining mechanism of consciousness raising, a practice that was popularized by feminists and gay liberation activists in the late 60s into the early 70s in the United States. And so I call on the memory of those women who gathered in living rooms and schools, and the men who formed coming out groups, and the queer and otherwise marginalized people who throughout history have found comfort and hope and inspiration in knowing that their joys and their sorrows are shared by someone else. The feminist leader Shulamit Firestone wrote in 1970 that the women are just beginning to find each other. Their first move is a careful joint observation to resensitize a fractured consciousness. This hopefulness, this beginning to find each other, brings us closer to justice and to reconciliation of our own. Dr. Polly Murray, a civil rights activist, was a woman of firsts. The first African American to receive a JSD from Yale Law School, a sort of PhD level degree in law. She was one of the founders of the National Organization for Women, who authored a brief with Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the case where the Supreme Court first ruled that the Constitution prohibits sex discrimination. And she was the first African American woman to be ordained as an Episcopal priest. Dr. Pauli Murray wrote, "Hope is a word in a tuneless ditty, a word whispered with the wind, a dream of 40 acres and a mule, a cabin of one's own and a moment to rest. Hope is a song in a weary throat." How do we sing our songs in our weary throats? We tell our stories. Inspired by the brave consciousness raisers, I gathered the leaders of our 20s and 30s group Aleinu to develop a new project to connect all of us. The idea is simple and vulnerable. Let's share our true experiences of pandemic life. Let's allow ourselves to cry a little in front of each other, just as Joseph did in front of his brothers. Pandemic Post Secret is inspired by the community art project Post Secret. We are collecting short written bits of anonymous truth-telling so that together we can witness and try to understand each other more deeply, and so that we feel less alone and more connected. We will share selected submissions totally anonymously, and we're very lucky that some early volunteers gave us a jump start. One shared, "I've been anxious all day, knowing I have so much work to do. Have I done any? No. Have I watched the entire series of The Undoing? Absolutely. I'll send one email at 4:30 and just go to sleep with regret, only to do this entire thing again tomorrow." A parent and grandparent shared, "In spite of the loneliness and the missing of loved ones, I am enduring. Letting go of feeling sorry for myself, FaceTiming with my therapist, making a life as best I can." A young professional shared, "When I tell my friends that it's hard not seeing people in person, they just say, 'Then see people.' But I don't feel comfortable. Their answers just don't let me feel the pain of isolation and hold it with me." Truth-telling is how we feel less alone. Truth-telling is also how we find compassion for others. And in the model of the story in the Torah of Joseph and his brothers, truth-telling is how we find peace and reconciliation. In this week, when we have watched our Congress haltingly try to work together to pass a huge relief bill, we have seen the beginnings of hope, the first seedlings of reconciliation, before our nation's president-elect takes office in just a few weeks. In a miracle of modern medicine, we have watched in awe as frontline healthcare workers, some in our own community, received COVID vaccinations this week. It was enough to make some cry. And we can let ourselves cry. Tears of joy and laughter and sorrow and even anger. And we can practice truth-telling. Try our CBST Pandemic Post Secret project. The link will maybe magically appear in the chat now, and you can use it now or find it in the Shabbat program later and submit, please submit your truth whenever is appropriate for you according to your Shabbat practice. And finally, let us all turn towards reconciliation, however we can, and may we find peace. Amen.